Welcome back, everybody. It's Zach here, bringing you guys another fantasy football video. It's week 15. It's the fantasy football playoffs here, so we've obviously got to put a lot of stock, a lot of overthinking that we're going to be doing this week in terms of just what our start sit decisions are going to be. Whether you're an underdog or a heavy favorite, you really want to make sure that you're making the most well-informed and best decisions possible for your lineup because the best we can do is make the most educated and informed decisions heading into the week and hope that it gives us the best chance to win on Sunday. So, going to be really important here that we get everything right. We've got a full slate of games this week, no more buys, so that's great. We're into the playoffs. We have 16 games to go through this week, so in today's video, I'll cover the first 8 games, and then Friday, so that we have the most injury updates, all the practice reports, and all that, I'll go over the final 8 games, touch on any additional questions, anything pops up there. So, other than that, though, if you guys have any specific questions, let me know in the comments. I'm always happy to help you guys out with start sit questions, and hopefully we can get you guys prepared and informed to get you guys some wins in a really important week here. So yeah, let's get into the first game. And again, any questions, just let me know in the comments. Starting things off with what should be a really fun game on Thursday Night Football. We've got the Rams going to San Francisco to play the 49ers. Really hoping we can find our way into a shootout in this one. We just saw the Rams win the highest scoring game of the NFL season so far. And I really do think we could see a really similar situation here. We're probably not going to get a 44 or 42 point game or whatever that was last week, but I think we could see a 30-30 situation here where we get a lot of points on both sides of the ball. Make Stafford and Purdy both like okay streaming options. I obviously prefer Brock Purdy to Stafford, especially without the health at the running back position. I know Garendo might suit up in this one, but even still, it feels like Purdy's got a much higher likelihood of having, being the player that the touchdowns funnel through as to where Stafford, you could always have rushing touchdowns by Kyron. So I'd prefer to be sitting Stafford, although I could just see a scenario in like a 14-team league or something where it would be okay to consider playing Stafford. Although I do view Purdy as a really solid starter. I got him in a league. I've got him and Tua that I've been alternating between. I'm rolling Purdy out there this week in a playoff game. So I like Purdy this week. For the Rams, Kyron, Kupp, and Puka, they're in every single week. Not really going to go anywhere else, though. It's going to be those 3 guys and just hope that things funnel through them. For the Niners, Juwan Jennings and George Kittle both feel like must starts. There's no way I could really see myself sitting either one of those players. I'm really uneasy about Deebo Samuel, though. I know you've got a bit of a squeaky wheel narrative. He's coming out saying he needs the ball more. He just hasn't looked good to me. He hasn't been good for fantasy for a long time, and I would prefer to bench him if I can. I do know that a lot of people are in, really desperate situations. I wouldn't be like going to the waiver wire to pick up like a low tier guy to play over him. I just think that if you have a comparable option, I would definitely be trying to get him in over Deebo. Isaac Garendo is the big question mark here. Solid start for me if he's active, but it really does come with risk. Obviously, there's re-injury risk. We saw that with Bucky Irving last week. These guys that don't practice a lot in the week, go into the game, there's always a risk of them getting injured right when the game starts. So, maybe he'll have a reduced workload. All sorts of reasons to be concerned there. But I think he's like a solid tier, like fringe top 20 back for me if he's active. If he is inactive, I think it makes Patrick Taylor like a low end running back 2 for me. You can play him if you need to. I wouldn't look towards guys like a Banaconda or any of that, but I wouldn't be super stoked about it. But again, I get it with the running back position. People need starts. You could do worse than Taylor if Garendo is inactive. Next up, we got a pretty fun game here between the Commanders and the Saints. For the Commanders, Brian Robinson's a must start here. We still have Austin Eckler on IR. The Saints going to be playing a backup quarterback in Jake Haener. So this should be a game where the Commanders win pretty heavily, and I think that could lean on Brian Thomas quite a bit. Especially the Saints, they've not been a good run defense this season. It's a really solid matchup. There's no way you're sitting Brian Thomas here. I can't really imagine sitting Jaden Daniels or Terry McLaurin either. A little bit of concern with those guys just because I think this is going to be a game the Commanders do win pretty easily. You always run the risk in games like this where the team gets up early, leans on the run game, and you just don't get the production out of the guys that you want. But I still think you're playing those guys for sure. Zach Ertz, he's streamable if you need to, but I really do think we can do better this week. I'd prefer to be looking elsewhere if I can avoid playing Ertz. For the Saints, I think it's just Alvin Kamara. They obviously don't have a whole lot of production that we'd expect to come from the passing game with a backup quarterback. MVS, super desperate, deep league option if you need to throw a dart throw out there, but you need like one big play for him to come through. Juwan Johnson, again, like I'd prefer Zach Ertz, and I don't think Zach Ertz is the best option, so I don't want to go there. Kendre Miller in like a super desperate situation, maybe he gets some goal line work and gets a touchdown, but really I think it's going to be Kamara only for the Saints this week. Next up, we got a game between the Chiefs and the Browns. The Chiefs going into Cleveland here. Really just don't want to start Patrick Mahomes in this one. I get it. He's been better of late, but last week wasn't fantastic for him in fantasy. This should be a game where the Chiefs defense can really keep the Browns offense down. You might even get a defensive score for the Chiefs in this one, which, if you guys understand, like when your defense scores touchdowns, the offense doesn't do very well for fantasy very often. So I think there's a lot of reasons to be concerned with Patrick Mahomes this week. Isaiah Pacheco, low end running back 2 for me. There's no way I'd be playing Kareem Hunt. I feel like Pacheco's going to need to score a touchdown to pay off, though. The Browns are a really high end run defense, even though the pass defense has sort of faltered this season. So you don't need to play Pacheco, but if you need like a low end RB2, I think he slots in there as a guy you can consider starting. Travis Kelce, he's in, obviously, with the tight end position where it is. I don't really get excited about playing guys like Xavier Worthy or DeAndre Hopkins this week. That you can use them as an option if you need to, but again, I think they're like low tier flex plays, guys that you could do worse than, but also guys that I would be hoping I can do better than as well. For the Browns, Jameis Winston feels super, super risky. Obviously, if you're like a heavy underdog and you really want to gamble on this game being a high octane explosive game, you could take that risk, but I just think there are better streaming options out there. I don't want to be playing Jameis Winston if I can avoid it. I don't want to sit both Cleveland running backs as well. Nick Chubb, you need a touchdown for him to pay off. He hasn't been efficient at all. Not catching passes, I don't want to go there. Jerome Ford, not going to get touchdown upside. Maybe catches a couple passes, but it just feels really desperate there. I don't want to play either one of those guys. Jerry Jeudy, David Njoku, both of them are in. Keep an eye on David Njoku. He's dealing with a hamstring injury right now. If he sits, I think it's just a bump for the wide receivers here, but tight end is sort of the best way to attack the Chiefs defense in general. So I think you'll be looking at Elijah Moore as a pretty significant beneficiary if David Njoku sits, because he sort of operates in that short area yardage similar to Njoku. So even still, though, I think Elijah Moore, like low end flex play regardless, does get a boost if Cedric Tillman sits again. I wouldn't want to play Cedric Tillman really, but if you need to, you can. Wide range of outcomes given that he's missed time and all that. But we saw him have some explosive games previously. You could do worse than Cedric Tillman if you absolutely needed to, but I would prefer to wait 1 week and see that he's back and involved in the offense before I trust him if I can avoid it. Next, we got what should be a pretty fun game here, but also a pretty easy one for fantasy. We've got the Bengals going to the Titans. For the Bengals, start all of them. Burrow, Brown, Chase, Higgins, all 4 of them are in. I know Higgins burned a lot of people last week, but he's just a boomer bust, like wide receiver 3, basically. There's a ton of upside with him every single week. We know the floor is not necessarily super high either because he is the clear number 2 in the offense, but he's a talented player. The Titans secondary has been beat lately, so I feel pretty confident about starting T. Higgins in this one. For the Titans, Tony Pollard feels like a must start. The Bengals are not a defense that scares me. You saw Rico Dowdle put up a really solid performance last week. Pollard's going to be a guy who'll get you 100 yards. If he scores a touchdown, you'll be ecstatic. If he doesn't, you'll have a low-end RB2 play, and you'll be totally fine. So you're playing Pollard. I think you're playing Ridley as well. Ridley's been really solid lately. Pretty high floor. The ceiling's there in a good matchup against Cincinnati. Can't imagine playing anyone else, though. I'm not going to play Nick Westbrook-Ikhine. You saw last week what happens if he doesn't score. No way we're going towards Will Levis, Chigakonkwo, just none of that. It's going to be Ridley, Pollard, nobody else for the Titans. Next up, we've got the Dolphins going to Houston to play the Texans. Should be a fun game here. Tua for the Dolphins. He's a solid streaming option. I mentioned earlier that I have Tua and Purdy. I am opting to play Brock Purdy over Tua, so he's not a must-start by any means, but I think Tua is going to be like a fringe top 12 quarterback this week, a guy that you can certainly consider starting, although the Texans defense has been pretty good against opposing pass offenses. Dolphins are also missing 2 tackles potentially this week, so we could see a situation where they have to get the ball out of their hands quickly. Makes Achane someone that I'm super confident in, a guy they're going to manufacture touches for. There's no way you're benching Achane anyway. Tyreek, he's a must-start as well. Has been great for the last couple weeks in a row. Feel pretty good about starting Jalen Waddle in this one as well. He's been trending up. Jonnu Smith also probably should be in lineups, but I get reasons for being a little bit concerned. Obviously, it gave you a goose through the first 60 minutes last week, saved it with a 3-catch, 44-yard touchdown performance in overtime. So I think you can do worse than Jonnu, but I understand it if you want to look elsewhere. I've got a league where I have him and Njoku. I'm leaning towards Njoku right now, although the hamstring injury has me concerned. I'm okay with having their option there for sure, especially if they've got to get the ball out of their hands quick. We could see David Njoku or Jonnu Smith more hyper-targeted with just the quick passing game. Kind of plays into what the Dolphins want to do anyway, maybe. So I think Jonnu's an okay start. Just again, I don't think he's a must-start by any means. For the Texans, there's no way I'm starting C.J. Stroud. Dolphins have been a really good pass defense so far this season. Granted, Rodgers had a good game against them last week, but I just can't play C.J. Stroud in the fantasy playoffs right now. Joe Mixon, Nico Collins, they're both must-starts, though. There's nothing to really consider there. And then Tank Dell is the only real question mark here. Really low-end flex option for me. I put him like right in the same tier as guys like Xavier Worthy and DeAndre Hopkins for the Chiefs. You can play matchups there. I think this is going to be a higher scoring game than that game, so I'd maybe prefer him to those two. But again, I don't feel great about it. I think I'd be okay just leaving him on my bench if I can. Next up, we got what's probably going to be the shellacking of the week. We got the Ravens going to the Giants. The Ravens are supposed to win by 14.5 on the road. I kind of feel like they're going to cover there. So the Ravens with Lamar, Derrick Henry, and Zay Flowers. All 3 of those guys feel like must starts. Even Zay Flowers, obviously there's some concern. Like what you always have in these games that are going to get out of hand. passing offense could just sort of go away after you get up 3 touchdowns in the first quarter. Even still, I think Zay Flowers will be a part of what they do early on, so I feel good about Zay Flowers this week. Probably going to start Mark Andrews as well, although the Giants have been actually pretty solid against the opposing tight ends so far this season. I know Juwan Johnson had a solid game last week, but over the course of the year, it's not been an area that they've given up a lot of fantasy points to, so you could potentially have a better option. Again, like maybe you've got Andrews and Jonnu Smith, Andrews and Njoku. I know a lot of people that have Andrews and like Jake Ferguson, that sort of thing. If you've got 2 tight ends with Andrews, you could consider looking at your other option, although I still think Mark Andrews is a pretty solid option. For the Giants, Tyrone Tracy, Malik Neighbors, the only 2 guys I would even consider playing for the Giants. Not super ecstatic here. This is going to be a game where they should not put up very many points. I think you're going to get Tommy DeVito again this week. It sounds like Drew Lock's in a boot, so not a lot of optimism for this offense here. I think Tyrone Tracy's a low-end running back too. You're hoping he gets hyper-targeted. He did have 10 targets last week, so that's obviously fantastic. Malik Neighbors, low-end wide receiver 3 for me. Like, the touchdown upside's not there. You're getting hyper-targeted. He's basically a poor man's CeeDee Lamb right now, but there's just no real upside there with him, but I still think the floor is there enough that in full PPR you can play him if you need to. Next up, we've got the Jets at the Jaguars. For the Jets, I'm expecting Breece Hall to sit this one out, so I would not anticipate having him if you have him on your roster. Garrett Wilson, Devontae Adams probably should be in lineups here. I feel like it's a fantastic matchup. I know Garrett Wilson wasn't as great as you would have hoped last week, but he still was fine. Rodgers missed him several times on what could have resulted in a much bigger day. I feel good about playing both those guys against a really, really bad Jaguars defense. Isaiah Davis and Braylon Allen, both okay starts as well, but not fantastic by any means. They're going to split probably 50-50. Feels like Isaiah Davis actually outplayed Braylon Allen just a little bit last week, so if things were going to split a little bit, I think you could see Davis getting like 55 to 45% of the snaps over Allen this week, so I'd prefer to play Isaiah Davis, especially because he just profiles more as the pass-catching back, more PPR upside there. But either way, I think you can play both of them as like low-end running back 2s. Neither one of those guys is going to be the reason you win your matchup this week, but they can certainly fill a hole if you're desperate at the running back spot. For the Jaguars, I feel pretty good about Brian Thomas this week. I know it's been tough to have confidence starting him with Mac Jones, but he's actually been putting up pretty solid yardage over the last several weeks. I know the touchdown upside is not necessarily there, but this Jets defense has been beatable lately. I feel pretty good about putting Brian Thomas in my lineup. Tank Bigsby led the team in carries last week significantly, was the clear lead back, at least in terms of who we want to give carries to. This is a Jets defense that, again, doesn't really scare me right now. I feel like pretty good about Tank Bigsby as a solid low-end running back, too. I kind of like his odds at a touchdown again this week. I know the Jaguars probably aren't going to score a ton of them, but I feel pretty good about Bigsby. Like, if you're desperate for running back 2, I think I'd prefer him to the 2 guys in New York if I had to make a selection there. I would probably sit Evan Ingram if I can, though. Mac Jones just isn't really using him a whole lot. He's a low-end tight end 1 option. You could certainly do worse. I'd play him over guys like Zach Ertz, Juwan Johnson, those kinds of guys. But if you have like a legitimate tight end option, I'd prefer to play that over Evan Ingram this week. And the last game to go over in this video is going to be the Cowboys at the Panthers. Believe it or not, the Panthers are favored to win this game, so plug your ears there if you're a Cowboys fan. But the Cowboys, I think Rico Dowdle and CeeDee Lamb both are going to be must-starts for me. The Panthers are not a run defense that scares me, so Rico feels like he's just going to continue his hot stretch. CeeDee Lamb, it was really great to see him put up a monster performance last week. We know he can still have great games even with Cooper Rush. Panthers defense doesn't scare me. I feel good about CeeDee Lamb this week. You can play Jake Ferguson too. We sort of saw it be a little bit more of a split between him and Ferguson, or him and Schoonmaker last week, probably just because he wasn't fully involved in practices earlier in the week. I think we'll see him sort of reclaim that role, and I feel pretty good about Ferguson as a low-end tight end 1 option. I'd play him over Evan Ingram for context. For the Panthers, Chuba Hubbard, he's a must-start for Carolina. He's the only running back left there. They got Mike Boone now, so like Chuba's going to get a ton of work here. Not a matchup that scares me. There's no way I'm benching Chuba. I think Adam Thielen is a rock-solid starting option as well. I really feel confident starting him as like a high-end wide receiver 3. I feel like he needs to be in lineups, especially in full PPR, and that's probably going to be it, though. I don't want to get cute with either of the quarterbacks. I don't want to play Leggett or Brandon Cooks or any of that. It's going to be Rico and CD, and then it's going to be Chuba and Thielen, and then Ferguson's the only question mark there for me. So that'll do it for the part 1 video for starts and sits for week 1 of the fantasy playoffs. Up next, I'll be going over the final 8 games, so stay tuned for that one. That video will come out on Friday. I'll get you guys all set with the last games here, make sure we have all the answers for you guys, get you guys as set for the fantasy playoffs as we can, and then of course Sunday morning I'll be going live 1 hour before the games kick off. I'll answer your start sit questions live on YouTube. I'll make sure that I have all the injury updates and everything, get you guys all set and informed as possible so that we can make sure we win our fantasy games this week. It's win or go home, so we want to make sure we make the right decisions here. Of course, if you have any questions, let me know in the comments. I love interacting with you guys there. If you don't want to miss the future videos, make sure you subscribe to the channel. And then, of course, if you made it this far in the video, just give it a thumbs up. It helps me out quite a bit. But yeah, appreciate you guys, and I'll catch you with the next video. Peace. Thank you guys for watching. If you haven't already, please be sure to subscribe to the channel, like the video, check out these other videos here if you haven't. If you want more content, please feel free to follow me on Twitter at RealSteelFFB. I'll be more active on there as the season goes on. Thanks. Catch you later.